Gentlemen, welcome to the panel. My name is Zuzanna Nowicka and I will have an honor to deliver the panel on how to effectively strive for equal LGBT plus rights. We are accompanied by Monika Rosa, who is an MP, Patryk Hilewicz of W ogóle Poland, and Bart Staszewski. Marga was supposed to be with us, however, she gave up taking part in the panel to protest against the involvement of Klementyna Suchanow. So there is a Facebook post shared. I wanted to ask about the protest caused by the decision of the Constitutional Tribunal that has rejected the right to have an abortion due to lethal defects of the fetus. Probably the key headline in news was women blocked, Poznan, the center is paralyzed, the tram driver is giving an applause, and the participants are dancing Polonaise. So we could see throughout Poland that people who fight for the rights of LGBT plus joined the strike. Why do you think that the fight for reproductive rights is important also in terms of LGBT plus circles? Thank you very much for allowing me to take part in this virtual panel. This is a joint fight. It's not about the fight for reproductive rights of women. This is not only the fight against the Law and Justice Party. This is the fight for the human rights, and it is fought using different ways. Sometimes it has been more intense, sometimes less. Within the past few weeks, it has become stronger. To me, the protests are the fight for freedom, rights to decide for yourselves, and the right to live in a free democratic state, and the right to feel good regardless of our gender, whether we are disabled or not, what is our sexual orientation, what's our gender, whether we are atheists or whether we believe in any other gods. To me, the protests are a kind of rebellion against oppression. This is the fight for freedom. So I do not think that the LGBT circles have joined the fight. This has been our common fight for the past years. Patryk, would you comment? Women are also LGBT plus. So in the women's in this community we have women who have uterus and who can give birth to children. So these are the groups. Women's are not minority. LGBT women are not a minority in Poland. However, these are the groups that are oppressed by the right-wing organizations and the church. So this fight is naturally joint fight. So I'm not surprised. I can say that I'm even proud when we see the slogans that homosexuals, gays support women. So we understand what is happening when somebody is spitting into your face and who is trying to take your rights away from you. Actually, LGBT people have never had any rights in Poland, and we still don't have them. So this pathology of the Polish state is quite well known, and the solidarity I find it really fantastic, and I'm not surprised. I think that we have the same enemies, the patriarchate. These are ultra-conservative fundamentalist organizations, politicians who are trying to impose their perspective on us. And as Patryk and Monika said, this is our common enemy. So we have to speak with one voice. LGBT groups, women, minority groups, because maybe the government will be against other groups soon. So the women's rights, LGBT rights, many rights are violated in Poland. Law and Justice Party is proposing a very bad future for us, vision. Thank you. One of the most emotional professional experiences of mine is when I was working with a lawyer, Ania Mazurczak. I took part in a case where the gender, the sexual identity of the child was to be determined based on the judicial decision. So very often we face different social problems. Another topic I would like to raise, it refers again to Margot's contribution. She said LGBT plus will demarcate the borders. We will decide which tools for fighting will be adequate, not our pseudo-supporters. Margot's actions and Bart's actions have often been criticized also by people who think themselves to be our or your supporters. So I wanted to ask whether the criticism of the fight of LGBT people rights, whether this is justified. Bart, could you please give your answer? Sometimes we have this clash by Tomasz Lis or Mrs. Gazdyra. It will not have, it will, so journalists would like us some journalists would like would like us to operate the way they see it. So I represent the group that wants to do its own business. So we've got some authorities, we've got some people we trust, for example, Adam Bodnar, people who support such activities. I feel certain, I feel confident. My group, LGBT groups, will always experience some resistance. LGBT activists were always a group of people to whom the society was quite suspicious, especially some journalists. I would like to say that I remember exactly when Bart met with the president, with the current president, and I remember the wave of criticism. I was following this because I was very interested in the arguments. So still, in non-hetero society, there is still not enough solidarity that would allow us to be trustful towards such people. So these people really don't want to they wouldn't like to damage the image. Well, I wouldn't like to meet the president because I've got a toilet at home and I don't need to use any other toilets. But I understand Bart's arguments. I fully support him as an activist. I have supported him when people were blaming him. So I think that this solidarity is starting, because it is usually like this. If the oppressive forces are intensifying their actions, this resistance is growing. I think that every activist, anybody who is involved in this has experienced criticism. I do not want to enter psychological aspects. I wouldn't like to analyze some comments on internet, but I think that there is some jealousy and the lack of empathy. It's everywhere. Monica? I think that the tools to have an effective fight for equality are very different, and we have a lot of different tools at disposal. We are using performances, happenings. They are becoming very popular in social media, in foreign media. we use these tools to show the prejudice against us. We had actions connected with Margot. We were hanging some flags on the monuments, and we were organizing different activities, for example, educational activities. We were using political tools such as involvement of MPs or members of parties. We were also using different questionnaires asking what homophobia is. Not everybody understands what homophobia is. The media are not providing the definitions. The discussion is just about insulting certain groups. So there are lots of different tools. So it depends what kind of an activist you are, what your sensitivity level is, or which function, which social role you are performing. This dictates the tools. I am an NP, so sometimes I take part in protest. I help people who are arrested during the protests by LGBT groups or arrested during women's protests. And I like the educational work most. I travel around Poland and I try to answer questions what equality is about, what the different communities want. And I hear different questions because very often people fear certain groups because they simply do not have enough knowledge. So they are asking simple questions, how is it going to impact our life? Who will play the part of the husband? Who will be the wife? So these are socially and culturally important questions. So they are asking about gays, lesbians, transsexual people. And we clarify these issues. So I like this work most, and I always support activists, female and male activists who will be protesting in different formulas. However, they will fight for their rights. Okay, I understand. Thank you. I would like to refer to the solidarity Patrick has mentioned. I wanted to ask you whether you feel that together with politicians, activists, MPs, you are creating the common front in this war you are taking part in. So Patrick, if you could start. I am a person who's not so open with strangers. So when you're using France, well, of course it's a metaphor, but I think that I've got one front, ideological front, together with Bart. Love is not exclusive. I have some front together with Margot, who is not here with us today. So we think in a similar way, and I support these people in their actions. I have some common front with the MP, with Monica. So yes, I think that although I am more involved in show business, in jokes, in comedy, very often we are sharing Bart's posts because we think they are right and they are valuable. So the situation is completely different than the right-wing papers write that it's that huge groups of lesbians will be killing unborn children. So this is the front that has started naturally, and I do hope that LGBT plus community will not enter into alliances with politicians. Actually, some parties have shown this approach. Bart, how do you think? I have already met with Bart talking about these issues. I was starting a club at the university, and we were making a movie, Article 17, and the event was interrupted by a fascist association, Polish nationals group. Do you feel this solidarity?
Budzi wśród polityków
I can feel that this is just awakening among the politicians. Some enter it smoothly, they actively help the LGBT society, while others need some more time and they definitely need to learn more. However, against all odds, the situation for the discussion on the rights of LGBT is favorable. We have heard what Margot was saying, and we saw some documentaries spreading the knowledge she was sharing. I am absolutely convinced that this will happen in the future. This is also our argument for discussing with the politicians, and it will be a strong argument because the group of people for whom it is absolutely obvious that the rights of LGBT people should be protected and ensured. 10 mayors of 10 cities and towns signed an agreement to organize a holiday of tolerance. We are going to keep calm and carry on, but we definitely need to operate on different levels. There are MPs who help us, who go to us with the streets, but we also need a long-term strategy. All these bring us closer to our objective. I refer here to some strategic litigations and acts. I don't think we should use formal words, but simply do what we know we should do. Monica, what do you think? My dream is that when the government changes, when the authorities change, the equality, gender equality should become the reality. It should apply to different issues, such obvious. This should be something obvious, not to fight for. Whether it's going to happen, I don't know. But we still have 3 years to go, and perhaps we'll smoothly, step by step, reach our objective. It can be more or less acceptable for everybody, but even the more conservative MPs start to accept that these are the obvious rights, that these are the things that we should no longer discuss about, but simply to implement it. However, politicians will never be activists. We need activists in order to know what to do. We need activists to learn from you and to know what we politicians should do. So this is like a bilateral cooperation. We get the information from you, but we also inform you on which stage we are, what else we can do. And this could be based on cooperation between these two parties and the media. Yes, you are absolutely right. The next question is more personal. I would like to refer to Jonathan Franzen. What is the luxury to comment on the situation in the kitchen of your own house and not to be responsible for it and not to bear any consequences? This is the luxury that you cannot afford, the luxury which is not available. I talked to Professor Urbanik, who accused Kaja Godek for violating his freedom. He talked about the feeling of burnout. Do you have a burnout syndrome? Do you feel exhausted? Patrick, in the context of your decision to leave Poland? Yes, now I'm in Barcelona. We decided to leave at the beginning of November, I wouldn't call myself an activist. I am like a clown who performs activist actions. I don't want to diminish the efforts of Bart or Margot. As for the quotation, I think it's right. Despite dealing with show business, we as w ogóle Poland read hundreds of personal messages, and recently we have received a lot of messages from young LGBT plus people who had to leave their homes because their parents discovered the children were homosexual. Some had problems at school because of their sexual orientation. We are not able to repair the situation. We can only provide contact data to some foundations or organizations which have the necessary tools. As for our decision to leave Poland, I took part in my first manifestation when I was 14. Then I paid some money to organizations, to activists. I'm 30 years old now, and I have no time and no power to participate in the pathology which takes place in Poland. But it's not only because of the law and justice. It had happened much earlier, and it was cascading. Faces in the streets did not appear when law and justice started to rule. I lived 30 years in the hell. I call Poland hell. Lovely people live here. We have beautiful landscapes and beautiful monuments, but living in Poland is like hell. I don't feel like waiting for any change for the next 30 years. If it happens, if again we have Donald Tusk or people who lure us with equality, it's nice to live in the country where I can hold my boyfriend's hand. It's nice to live in the country where I can wear such a t-shirt and nobody is looking at me as if I were a shit. I really envy such people like Bart who have the power and will to stay in the country and to fight, because I think such people are the treasures of the country. We should not live remembering the past, saying that we should die for our fatherland. But I really do admire people who have the sense of mission. I don't want to enter Bart's mental traces, but I really do admire and respect you. Thank you. Monica, where do you find the power to fight? I think that every story of every discrimination, aggression, words of hatred provides more energy to fight. Every time somebody hits you, you feel motivated to act. Being an MP of the opposition for 5 years, I reached the wall and it was like banging against the wall. Then a question emerges or somebody helps you and you feel the motivation to work again. I feel motivated by the people, by the society. We talk about LGBT here, but there are many people who are discriminated in Poland.
There are people with disabilities, ethnical minorities, the group of people from Silesia who is not who is not approved or perceived by the society, elderly people. COVID has highlighted, emphasized these problems. I feel responsible being an MP myself. I think we should keep on going. So I am motivated by people. Bart, what about you?
Znaczy, ja nie wiem skąd biorę tak naprawdę najpierw mojego chłopaka, który siedzi obok mnie i zawsze działamy
I don't know where I
wspólnie
can
dzień
find the
dzień i
power.
noc, ponieważ
My
ma
boyfriend motivates me. He is sitting next to me now, so he like remains in the shadow, but he is my motivation. I am also 30 years old. I feel that you only live once. I don't believe in the promises to have better life after a death.
politycy, tak jak mówi Patryk,
If
że generacje
there are
pokoleń
other
pokoleń
politicians
będą
who
tak
lure us or who
do
promise
pasa,
something, just
który
like
dostajemy.
Patrick said,
Jest
that
to
we'll
według
get
mnie
something,
pocieszające, ale sądzę, że
um,
ja wkładam w to
I
całą
don't believe
masę
in it.
taką
However,
jedną masę tak
I
adrenaliny,
am
cieszę się,
driven
kiedy mi się
by
udaje, kiedy się nie
my
udaje, kiedy
successes.
się
I
złożą
draw
jakieś
conclusions
wady,
from
to
failures. I
no to
think
wszystko
how to
gdzieś
go about
przechodzi
it
do
to
naszego życia.
succeed next time.
I
This is
samochód
what we do for
jest
the
spowodowany
majority of our
olbrzymim
lives.
strachem.
The price I pay
Budując
is the
codziennie codziennie
fear
swój samochód,
whether
policjant uważa, że jeśli go
the
wyjedziesz, to
police
trzeba
will
pomóc.
not visit
Jeżeli
me
policjant był nad morzem,
at
to jeśli dzwoni, to
6
musi przyjść
a.m.
policja
If
i tak dalej, i tak dalej.
somebody
Polecam
rings
oficjalnie
the
policjanta,
doorbell, then I'm
funkcjonariusza, który
again,
przyjdzie do mnie albo do
then
kogokolwiek
that
i
this
po
might
prostu zrobi.
be the
Także jest
police.
ten strach,
Yes, so
który po
the
prostu
fear
daje
is
sens
always
temu zachowaniu
behind, and this
skutecznym
is the
naszych działań,
price for
bo
being
uważam, że
recognized, or this is the price
samochowanie
for
to
the
aktywiści,
effectiveness of our
to jest też taka
activities.
cena za skuteczność. Aktywiści pracy nienawiści, którzy zostali pozwani do
Activists
konstruowania
are
tego
very
typu
often the objects
to
of hatred or the objects
ale mamy tak zwaną
of
niezależną
wrath. We
większość,
also have case
które
proceedings
dobrze wprowadzają
which will
podatek na polityczne
um,
organizacje,
last
wykorzystując demokratyczne narzędzia do tego,
several
żeby
more
walczyć z
years.
wolnością słowa i z aktywistami, tak?
Because there are some democratic tools to combat the freedom of speech, to combat the activists. Everybody can lose their immunity to the number of court cases. Then, instead of going on holiday, you have to go to court, consultations with lawyers. You have to be careful whenever you publish something on Facebook. It's hard, but I'm getting used to it. I think the same is true for other activists, despite the fact that they sometimes experience burnout and many people leave. This is our reality in Poland nowadays. I can promise that when I have the right to represent you in court, I definitely will. You you keep on repeating that you are not waiting for another politician who will lure you with the promises. Monica, from the point of view of an MP, what needs to happen in Poland to see the change if we don't believe in politicians? We believe in people, but politicians are also people. So it depends whom we want to appoint. Definitely, the change of the power is necessary, and we have to select the people who will who showed that they care for equality. This is what needs to happen. However, it requires a major social change that will not happen overnight. The first civil law relationships in Denmark 1989, and in our country the situation has deteriorated in the 30 years period. We need sexual education, a change in the society's mindset, and a change in the law. We don't accept equality in marriage in a referendum, but we create certain legal framework. And this is also educational. I think election, political activity, this is the key, what we should do, both on the parliamentary and local governmental level. We need to consciously vote for those who will act for LGBT groups or groups of excluded groups. In order to have this systematic change, we need a group to implement it.
Patrick, what should happen in Poland for you to decide to come back to Poland? I don't know whether anything can occur during my lifetime. Maybe a miracle will take place. I am a pessimist. I cannot see any options. I think we need many years. Frankly speaking, we need some people to die, to disappear. And I mean both media representatives and politicians or other people who think that they are authorities. As regards politics, I think we should finish this alliance between Civic Platform and Law and Justice parties. On the one hand, right-wing party says that the other person is party is evil, and vice versa, and it is all going towards the right wing. So I do hope that the Law and Justice party will be out of power and the Civic Platform will fall apart, and the best of its of fragments of the civil coalition, just like the MP, they will join more progressive, not regressive parties. Or maybe a new party will be founded. I do hope that very quickly the Civic Platform will close its activities, and I do hope that the Catholic Church that takes an important part in terms of a criminal organization. I think I am a great fan of Mr. Jędraszewski and his cronies, and I think they should communicate more of this crap, because thanks to this, people start to realize what kind of organization this is, what kind of organization they take part in. People start seeing this vomit on the floor. That is why people will want to leave, to quit. So I keep my fingers crossed for Mr. Jędraszewski. You are doing a great job. Thank you very much. Bart, how do you think? Do you think that there will be a day when you will become a pensioner as it comes to the activism? Well, I imagine that this fight will never be completely finished. If we look at such countries as the United States, where activists all the time have to follow the direction, all of a sudden somebody as Trump comes on stage. So it's you always have to make sure that the rights are observed, because some politicians are wealthy. People will want to take these rights away from us, or the Catholic Church will want to take these rights away from us. So I do think that it will never happen. Of course, we will recover the rights. I'm sure about this. The Law and Justice people, Catholic Church, really gets us closer to regaining the rights. The vision of the word suggested by these people is so primitive, it is so weak that nobody would like to live in the Middle Ages. So it is only appealing to Law and Justice Party, to the priest, to a part of people who follow Law and Justice Party and who will always vote for these parties. But young people who are becoming more aware people who joined the equality marches, the protests, women's strikes. Actually, this is 90% of Catholics in Poland have joined the march, the protests.
mają dość tego typu
They are also fed up with this type of treatment. This taboo is finished. Catholic Church is not an untouchable authority. So, despite of all these evil things that started after 2015, very soon we will have, well, quite soon we will have new government. I know that Mayor Trzaskowski will strengthen his position. We will probably witness it during the next parliamentary election, and we will start rebuilding what Law and Justice have damaged. The law and politics. 3 days ago, European Commission presented the first European strategy for the equality of LGBT plus people, and there are a lot of new laws suggested. So, for example, the rights of the parental rights of the rainbow families will be ensured. Also the language, the hate language against LGBT people is included in the strategy. How do you assess the strategy? Is this just a nice gesture, or is this something which will provide real changes? Because if we look at the situation in Poland, it's very hard to imagine that the language of hate, there will be the crime of the language of hate in the Polish criminal code. Monica? Gestures are important. This gesture is also important, but we will see whether the Commission will amend the legislation concerning the language of hate or the rainbow families, the birth certificates of their children, but I don't think that it will generate any impact on the Law and Justice Party, even in the situation where the EU budget will depend on the state of the rule of law. Actually, the veto of the Polish government will reduce our access to the EU funding. So if it does happen, actually we will not see any changes. Even in Hungary, there are common law rainbow families, but I do not think it will happen in Poland. It's great that such a strategy of the European Commission has been developed. It's great if we have legislation. It's great that there will be lobbying to exert some pressure on Poland. We are a very pro-European society, although not everybody in Poland knows what this pro-European approach attitude means. We travel abroad, especially young people travel, they meet their peers in different countries. English is not a problem. English language is not a problem with them. Now we can see a lot of young people protesting, so they will demand such rights, especially if the European Union will impose such requirements on the Polish government. Bart? What do you think about this strategy? This is very important to me. Ursula von der Leyen, apart from the EU resolution, she actually was talking about this 5-year strategy, which is like a compass for us. So the European Union will develop the legislation. It will develop some models under this legislation. Of course, Poland can be outside of these models. It will not replace the domestic law, but some thresholds will be required. And this will really depend how much money Poland will receive. So I represent LGBT lobbying. So we have to have a bottom-up approach. So if we do not have liberal movement here, we will have to count for the assistance of the European Union. So it doesn't matter whether the liberals will be at the central or regional level or not. They will have to make sure that the projects will have to be assessed in terms of whether they are not discriminating on or not. When there are EU calls for proposals, actually protection of minorities or discriminating procedures are of huge importance. So we will see whether it will be effective. We've got two strong allies, the United States. Equality Act, the diplomacy will be different. It will be more open during the presidency of Joe Biden. So the Polish politicians will have to address this, and there will be support for people who are discriminated. Patrick. I have a problem with it, because on the one hand, I like this gesture and the assumptions that are included in the strategy. On the other, I think that the European Union, which in my opinion is a clever structure, but of course it's not perfect. It's very diverse. And very often the European Union has very little real authority. For instance, in the context of Poland, where we see pathologies in terms of courts, women's rights, non-hetero groups' rights. So I don't know to what extent this strategy will be realistic, that will really mean some changes, and I don't know to what extent this strategy will be just like a decree. Somebody will write that, okay, you are not allowed to do this, but to be honest, there won't be any legal duties to implement this. So it would be great if this situation has changed, and that this real authority and this real impact is greater, and that the funding is really available, just as Bart was saying, because the funding is needed for organizations. They are poor. They have no money to act. They have a lot of good ideas, but they have no money to implement them. So I do hope that at least the funding will be provided. Yeah, I hope so too. So we've got 3 minutes left. So I'm going to use this time to say that I really wish Margot was with us today. Margot said in a long interview about her family, it was probably for Gazeta Wyborcza, she was saying about Polish families, and she said that we are not for ourselves. So to the audience, I would like to ask you to conclude. Just tell us how to be a better ally on daily basis. Monica. First of all, we should listen to people about their needs, and if we see that something evil is happening, then we should interact. We should ask how we can help. What do you need? Do not impose. Just be open, listen, and solidarity is really important. Bart? Be interested in this topic. Do not postpone it, and look also at the politicians. Look at the councillors. Ask whether they've got an alternative, whether they were voting for LGBT, why they have missed the voting in the parliament. So just watch the politicians you have elected. This will be half of this success. And Patrick, your advice? My advice is
To, że coś uważamy o jakiejś społeczności czy jakimś konkretnej osobie, to nie musi być prawda.
Be humble. Sometimes we can have insufficient information. If we make a mistake, once we find out that we have made a mistake, please feel this responsibility for repairing this mistake, at least apologizing for it. I hope that as many people as possible will address it, deal with it. Thank you very much for taking part in the panel. I hope that next time we will meet face to face. I think that this discussion was great and I can't wait to meet with you again. Thank you.